Yes. Mhm.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's latest CARES Act webinar, a complimentary resources to assist in transitioning your classes to online during COVID-19 and beyond, with our special guest here today from Pearson. As we always do, we'll get started here in approximately 10 minutes. I'll go over some of the normal and customary reminders at about 5 minutes too, and at the start right at 2 o'clock. Welcome to all of you all who have already joined with us. Some 15 to 20 of the over 100 that will be joining us today. So stand by and we'll get started promptly at 2. Hey, let's try that again with the sound on. Welcome to everybody. We're about 5 minutes away from the start of today's CARES webinar, the seventh in the series that looks at various aspects of the challenges resulting from the COVID pandemic. Today, we'll be focused on additional ways in which we can hopefully share information not only for you as an institution, but for your faculty and their delivery of education, as well as for just individuals in coping and trying to get through the pandemic. Our good friends from Pearson are those that are going to be providing or helping us with the sponsorship of today's webinar, and Diane Hollister, who will be providing the lion's share of the walkthrough of their information on the website. So we'll get started here in about another 5 minutes. Well, once again, good morning or afternoon, everyone. We want to welcome you to today's seventh in a series of C-SPAN webinars where we'll be focusing on other aspects of the CARES Act. A couple of the normal reminders and the do's and don'ts as we get started today. First and foremost, this, along with all of the CARES Act webinars, are being videotaped so that you can return to the C-SPAN website and review the slide presentation and also the video at your leisure. Those are at cspan.com or centralstatesedu.com, either one. We now have both URLs, so you can go to either one and it'll get you directly to the website. Click on resources and you'll have access to the information. So all of it will be there. We please ask that you use the Q&A section of this particular webinar, as we do with all webinars, and the opportunity for us to respond to your questions. We will be sending out an opportunity for you to follow up with us on any questions that we don't have answers to, and all the answers that we do have answers to will be sent to you in a follow-up Word document. We're in the process of just completing the summary of the 72 questions that came about as a result of last week's webinar on Thursday. So all of you that participated last week, and for all of you who were seeking the shared information of the questions that came from that particular webinar, we'll be providing that on our website once again, probably tomorrow, but Thursday at the latest, in preparation for one of our next webinars that I'll talk about at the conclusion of today's webinar. What we're going to do today is focus on two areas. First and foremost, we want to thank our friends at Pearson for sponsoring today's webinar, and for Diane Hollister, who I'll talk about here in just a second, who is going to walk you through aspects of their website and ways in which, once again, to enable you at the institutional level, the faculty and staffing level, and the delivery of online education, and as individuals dealing with the pandemic, to have discussions and hopefully provide some very, very useful tools for you as you look at this. But as we always do, I'm going to take about 3 to 5 minutes to remind you of the most recent update with regard to the political and regulatory environment as it relates to COVID and all of the challenges that we are working our way through. Last week did see some major changes and some major updates. In the center there, President Trump signed the second CARES Act stimulus package, providing an additional overall $750 to $800 million in additional funding to help support healthcare, as well as additional money for the Paycheck Protection Program and the opportunity for small business loans, the first half of which, or the first tranche of which, was significantly diminished in almost nothing flat, to provide additional money with Congress for additional SBA loans. The original amount was $349 million. Now they've added an additional $321 million, bringing that total up significantly, and once again providing additional funds in the hopes that this will provide a stimulus to maintain the economy, spur economic development and continuation, and most importantly, as those funds are designated to be utilized, to instill and ensure that employees continue to have access to payroll and the ability to therefore meet their own financial resources and needs at home. We'll go over that in greater detail in an upcoming webinar on Thursday, but again, please hold for the end of the day to discuss that. At the department side, or on the department's level, we also saw two new FAQs that were presented last Tuesday, a week ago today, from Secretary DeVos and the Department of Education. It provided additional information on the HERF, or Higher Education Emergency Relief Funds, that are the funds provided in the CARES Act for institutions of higher education to utilize, 50% delivered and distributed directly to students, and another 50% that the institutions can utilize for both sides, using the money in order to deal with circumstances based on the displacement that occurred as a result of COVID-19, the transition to online that we're talking about today in so many different facets. We encourage you to read and review those documents and that information. It's what formed the basis of last Thursday's webinar that you can look online to review, and will be the basis of our upcoming webinar this Thursday with a number of attorneys. But again, I'm giving you a little taste, so hopefully you'll stick around to the very end in order to hear about what we have coming up for you this Thursday and in 2 following webinars next week. I'm not going to go over that information because we do have a phenomenal individual with us today. She is an individual that has worked within the community for many, many years at both the elementary and secondary level and the higher education level. She is currently on an adjunct staff member for the University of Maine, but also spends a great deal of time in her current capacity with Pearson, focusing on learning techniques and the neurobiology associated with higher education policy and the delivery of education. I'm speaking, of course, of Diane Hollister, who will be our presenter today, and she will be walking us through the webpage that is provided by Pearson and all of the working and learning online during the pandemic tools and resources that they have developed. So without further ado, I'm going to switch this over to Diane so that we can give her access to the ability to share her screen. So this will hopefully transition over. There we go. And I'm going to turn it over to Diane with my great appreciation. Diane, I'm turning it over to you so that you can go ahead and get started sharing your your camera along with your web screen. And with that, Diane Hollister from Pearson Education, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome everybody. We're going to spend a considerable amount of time exploring some resources today. I'm so happy to work with you. Feel free to ask questions. We are going to spend some time exploring this. There's quite a bit here, and the one thing that I'll joke with you, as we have with some of our team members, is it's sort of like a rabbit trails. The more you dig, the more you find, the more you keep finding, and things you didn't even know you needed. Certainly, if you're using a particular product, for example, if you were teaching with my math lab, which is one of Pearson's really well-known products, all of them, if you click on one of those sites, have training resources. So if you click on a training site, you'll see material specific to that product, recorded webinars, videos, how-to sheets. This particular website that we're going to explore today is not specific to a particular product or platform. These are a lot of resources that have been compiled from multiple teams across Pearson to help educators as well as families and students, to get through this rather unique situation we find ourselves in. There are resources for parents, as I mentioned, not just faculty on here, educators, students, as well as even just the general public if they're exploring some additional resources and education things to do while they're stuck at home. So first of all, let's just take a very quick walkthrough before we explore any of the specific materials. You'll notice that we do have the materials sort of sorted here into primary categories: higher ed, K-12, then resources for working from home, as well as links to Pearson Worldwide. This is something I want to call your attention out to here on the main page. We have a live webinar series that we're featuring some authors and student perspectives on the pandemic. So we can click there to learn more about these. As these are completed, they are recorded and posted. So there is a fourth one coming up that you could register for and explore, but you can see here what each of them is about. So we have episode 4 coming up later this week about women's health on the front lines and how, the pandemic affects that. The science of the virus is coming up. And here are prior ones that have already been done this month. We've gotten a lot of great feedback about those, so I just encourage you to explore some of those. And again, as I stated, you're going to see that there's a lot of material on these pages for us to dig into. If we continue to scroll, we do see higher ed resources, and we'll come back and explore these in a little bit more detail here after we do our overview tour. For faculty, we have a lot of resources to help you get started teaching online. For many of us in higher ed, this was a rather abrupt change, and many faculty are like, help, what do we have that can help us make this transition? What kind of resources are out there? Not always specific to a particular product, but just best tips and practices. How to make your online teaching more effective. Sorry about that. Of course, phones ring when you're on a call. Just ignore it. It'll go to automated. Also, teaching featured content, teaching online in a summer term. For many of you, you've probably taught online before in compressed formats, but sometimes when you have to do that suddenly and when you haven't had the time to kind of plan all of those things, you might look for some tips and tricks on how to do that. How to identify students that are at risk. Even practices for training instructors. One of the things that my team is working on, and we are all faculty, we've all been full-time faculty, all of us are still teaching part-time. One of the things we're working on is to build an adjunct toolkit because, for example, when I was division chair at the community college, I recognized that I had, I think, about 40, 45 adjuncts to be working with. And so that's a lot of people to keep tabs on. And when you hire somebody, especially if they're new to teaching, you want to be able to provide them with not only product knowledge on how to use the tools you're giving them, but also just content about pedagogy and best practices. For students, we also have resources here, how to help them learn effectively online. How to locate, for example, accessibility information if they're struggling with some special needs, how to access some digital resources if they need some more materials than they already have. For many students, this was their first time venturing into a fully online system, obviously, and so that comes with its own set of challenges. And so we, again, across Pearson have generated resources for how to be a student, but to be a fully online student. Many students are struggling with not having that connection in the classroom, not having the kind of face-to-face support and tracking. So what are some tools that we can use to help facilitate that? How to be proactive and present as an online student. You'll see as we explore some content that we've also recognized that the pandemic has affected not just academics, but also behavioral issues. So we are recognizing that both faculty and students, as well as parents, everybody, is dealing with stress, is dealing with new time management issues, is dealing with how to handle all of the implications that these changes have been making in our lives. And one, of course, that's somewhat tongue-in-cheek as the discussion started, but being an introvert in an online world. I also joke about extroverts. I have some friends that are very much extroverted, and they're struggling with not getting enough interaction even with Zoom and with digital tools. So we've got some content related to how do we cope with these changes and how we interact with each other. For K-12, again, we have a lot of resources. Online learning isn't necessarily new for many, digitally savvy students and teachers, but when it becomes the full-time way of operating, it can be challenging. So for teachers, we do have, for example, some free high school math resources from one of the authors. We have support for teachers that are implementing virtual learning. They have Teaching with Impact, developing meaningful teacher-student connections, and so forth. Free webinars if you're teaching special ed, working with that. Even some sample schedules, online teaching hotline, and again, wellness tips. Same for students and their families, lots of resources. Again, great things to explore and dig into. One of the things that I just recommended working with somebody earlier today was this creating a daily schedule, printable planner. If you click into this, this was just a really nice tool that allows you to kind of start to create one of your own little teacher plan books. For many of us that have been teaching, those kinds of tools look familiar, but for people who are suddenly homeschooling basically for the first time, it's kind of overwhelming. And so even just having a simple little planner page can be a nice tool. There's also this free webinar and podcast for parents learning online from home. We've had a lot of great feedback about this. Is from Connections Academy, which is one of the online tools shifting to online school, but there are some resources here for families, again, as well as educators. And working from home. My team is a remote team. We do all work from home, but many teams in Pearson were not, and many of the rest of the people that are working in this country were not used to working from home. And so a big part of keeping people healthy, of course, with the pandemic meant that we transitioned to working from home, working remotely, and it can be a challenge, especially if you have multiple people all working in the same area, all trying to study, trying to deliver. For example, sometimes we joke that our dogs like to be part of the conversation because they feel the need to bark when you're trying to record a webinar. But for many people, it's more than just that. It's little children running through the room, or it's teenagers that are needing to do their schoolwork while you need to be online. So there's some navigation tools here, staying motivated, how to be a student again online. We mentioned that one earlier, wellness tips, remote work tips, and so forth. Certainly, if you have colleagues in other areas, you're looking for some other resources, you can even click down here in the map. One of the things that you might recognize as you think about that is the need for ELL resources. What we've learned with some schools, of course, is as they've had to transition to being fully online, that ELL students were really struggling because they don't have that face-to-face support. And so for them, we found some other tools that we can do by modifying some of the materials that we deliver to help them make it more accessible or more readable, even literally redoing some videos so that there was minimal text, very simple explanation to help students find the resources they need when English is a second language. We're going to go click and explore into the higher ed resources a little bit here. So again, from this main page, we can explore resources to help us get started teaching online. And you might say, well, we've sort of been thrown into that recently, and that's definitely true. We have a short video here, 12 minutes long, about moving your course online for the first time. And it basically just has best practices. Again, many of us have already taught some online, but it's always good to hear from peers and to learn from others. What are their strategies? What are their tips and tricks? After you sort of watch that, or if you're thinking, I'm kind of past that point, right? I have a toolkit that I can explore. This offers step-by-step instructions for building a course, regardless of whether you're using a learning management system or not, and what tools you might want to use, what features. This is really nicely laid out. If you're working with a learning management system like Blackboard or Canvas, Moodle, D2L, you can click here for LMS online resources. If you're not, you can click on the non-LMS format. Again, these toolkits walk you through setting up your roles, and you even get to choose like what are your current needs. I need to start like yesterday, or I'm building my course and I'm ready to build my course in an LMS, but maybe I have a little bit of time for summer, or I just need some digital solutions. And so it gives you the opportunity to explore. I'm going to click into LMS Online just for an example for a moment here. So this is a great outline. If this is kind of something new, I know that I taught with WebCT, I taught with Angel, I taught with Canvas, now I teach with Blackboard, you know, different schools, different trends over time. There are some commonalities with tools and learning management systems. You're going to have a homepage. You have the ability to do announcements. You can post your syllabus, have a calendar, you have gradebook settings, and then you typically have folders or sections or modules to sort information. Frankly, we're going to be switching to D2L, Brightspace, and so it's a little overwhelming to sort of start to think to redo that from scratch. So I even find this really, really helpful. We have this course essential checklist. What are some things I need to do? Because if you've been doing this for a while, or if you're brand new, it's easy to overlook a step or a piece that might be really helpful. So this kind of walks you through some resources and a sort of step-by-step outline. And then you can see some other digital solutions, implementation tips, even just how do I make a really good announcement? Some of the LMS and some tools will allow you to post an announcement, but also email it to your students. Sometimes we suggest to faculty, you might want to use a tool like Remind 101. Remind 101 allows you to send a quick announcement via text message to students. It's very private, all FERPA compliant. They can sign up with a code. And so when you do an email blast to your class, a little text message comes to their phone. Just little tips and things like that. Formatting, really simple things like thinking about when you post a document, are you posting it as a Word doc or are you posting it as a PDF? Some tools like that can make a difference depending upon what platform a student's using. Posting it as PDF makes it more readily accessible even if they don't have Word. Okay, so going back to our Getting Started Teaching Online page, we've looked at our welcome video and we've looked at our Diving Deeper online toolkit. And then we've got 15 tips and tricks and ideas for teaching online exams. And these are two instructors who are experienced online instructors, and they share their best practices for converting assessments from in class to being online. That has been one of the things that we have gotten the most questions about in the last couple of weeks. Even if those of us that are teaching have been using technology tools for homework or maybe some quizzes, a lot of us were still used to giving paper pencil exams or maybe having proctored exams in a testing center, and all of that's changing. Now we need to be able to deliver it online. What are some things to think about? We have some other tips and tricks, and you'll see them in our blog posts even, ways to mitigate cheating. For example, a lot of the technology allows you to pool questions, and of course use algorithmically generated questions to provide more variety, to scramble question order. Same with your learning management system. You can set the quizzes so that the questions provide more variety for students and it's less likely that they can, quote, game the system. Depending what tools you are using online, you can also set things like obviously setting the time length for the test, not allowing students to walk away and come back, or perhaps using proctor tools, using something like show work options. One of the ones that Pearson's exploring is GradeScope. That will soon be something that we'll work with. Some of our products also have built-in things like lockdown browser tools, or the ability to require students to show work. You might say, oh, wish my product had that. That would be so great. One of the things we suggest is whatever tool you're doing, whether you're testing in your LMS or online in some other way, you can always require your students to scan their work to you as soon as they're done with their test. I give my students 15 minutes. They have to have taken the pictures of their work. They can use an app like Easy Scan, ScanBot, Cam Scanner, one of those, snaps pictures of their work, send it to me. I have a PDF. I can look at their work. I can grant partial credit. I also have documentation. So depending upon how you set up your testing, you can say if you have the correct, computed answer, or you have chose the right multiple choice response, great, you get 3/4 of the credit, but the rest of the credit comes from me checking your work. All sorts of tips and ideas for online exams. There are FAQs for teaching online. And again, just because there's so much different material here, you can really spend some time exploring where can I find best practices. Again, lots of different things. We have a resource hub. This resource hub is absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to click there for a minute and you're probably going to say, okay, wait, I'm not going to be able to keep track of all of that. This just takes you right back to where we were before. So don't panic. A lot of these will click you back to the main pages, even if you explore some other pages. If you are already using a Pearson product, My Lab, Mastering, you teach with Revel, as I stated, you can go directly to that product to the training site, and you can find specific materials. We have on-demand webinars, we have handbooks, we have quick start guides, a lot of videos, all sorts of tools. I still have questions. Where do I go? What are the tools we have for somebody who maybe can't access their books? What about digital materials through, Vital Source or Red Shelf, or what can I look at on my ebook app? All sorts of resources are there for you. We're going to explore the blog next. This blog is an amazing website of resources. This currently is moving to tips for moving an online class, taking a class online quickly, but this teaching and learning blog has, again, a pre-K 12 education site. It has a higher ed site, and it also has industry professional workforce site. You can subscribe, so when articles are posted, you can follow that. This one in particular, you'll see was released in mid-March, kind of at the start of this whole pandemic. Tips and tricks for moving a class online. And again, some little just things to think about as you explore the articles. How are you going to teach? Are you going to do synchronous, asynchronous? What does that all mean? How am I going to engage my students? Do they have discussion forums? Do I do small group work? How do I communicate with them? Do I do virtual office hours? What are the tools I'm going to use? Lots of resources. You'll see that there's also related articles down here. We can also visit the homepage for this, but again, a really wonderful resource, being purposeful and proactive. There's the online student, being an introvert. How can faculty spot and support struggling students? Being a leader in a virtual world. There are quite a few of these. You can search by tags and topics as well. We're going to just jump to the general higher education page. You can see kind of what's recent. So just in the last few days, you'll see that there are quite a few articles that have been posted. These come from different teams across Pearson. So here's a student story, an education story. Wherever learning flourishes, so do people. There's a little blurb in there from our CEO. Staying home doesn't mean going it alone. And this is from an executive director that we have working with our program development for Smart Thinking, which is an online tutorial software. These were literally just put out yesterday. Last week, we had one, 5 tips to stay motivated when you're working remotely. We have an entire amazing learning science research team. And so Dr. Dan Belenke from that has shared some information about staying motivated when working remotely. As I said, many of our teams are fully remote, others are partially remote typically, but we've learned some things through that. And so some of those tips are shared here. Another kind of success story, from building fences to building a successful career in construction. So this is kind of a fun one if you've ever watched the Do-It-Yourself Network on television, kind of following up with that. And then moving back to virtual classrooms, an expert's guide, help I'm testing online for the first time, moving labs out of the laboratory. This has come out of our teams, providing resources for faculty. Moving a science course completely online isn't so bad, maybe so much for the lecture part, but the labs, how do you work with that? So what are some tools that I can use for that? So if I click here, what can I do to do that? Non-traditional labs, how effective are they? What can I do? What are some examples? So my team has generated some resources here for you. Okay, and again, teaching online in summer terms, teacher self-care. This is from one of my team members. She's got an amazing background in communications and psychology, and she just wrote this wonderful article about taking care of yourself when you're working from home. This was another fun one too, from armchair traveler to globetrotter to podcaster, and some of his information. And again, you can click and explore many, many more tips for taking active learning online, building community in an online classroom. This is another one from my team. My colleague Aaron uses affinity grouping for his students. So you'll see a lot of variety here, and we encourage you to explore those. Come here and take a look and explore. Again, you have lots of tags here. You can also search this page and then follow the blog. Okay. So moving back to moving online quickly, that was from our moving online page. Again, these also cross-reference, so they can take you quickly to resources to moving your course online, being effective online, cost-free digital resources. This is really, really helpful. So cost-free resources, right? I need some digital access. My students need some materials. What can I do? If your campus uses VitalSource or Red Shelf, you can explore here on those. And certainly talk with the sales rep as well for more detail for those. You can also explore the content collections for higher ed students. So here for your students, I have to learn online, and we as educators, we want to be able to give our students some additional resources, maybe a podcast, an article, a blog, a link. So here's a great place to go for that. This referenced back again to some blogs we saw earlier, how to be a student this time online, being proactive and purposeful as a student, not just as a faculty member, being an introvert. What's the importance of community? And this comes from a student's perspective, the importance of community and online learning. How do I cope with my semester being completely disrupted? We've gotten great feedback from these. So again, there are a lot of resources here, not just for educators, but also for students and then for parents as well. We mentioned some free resources, sample schedule, printables, and so forth. One of the ones that someone just commented on, they really liked this, was the coronavirus and learning from home. And again, that takes you to the podcast with Connections Academy. But just some tips and tricks. Again, there's also the free webinar link as well. Okay. So I'm going to pause there for a few minutes and offer you some opportunity for some questions. We're just about at the half-an-hour marker. We can definitely dive in more detail with any of these things, but I would like to offer you the opportunity to ask some questions. You're going to find it most helpful, most likely, to come here and explore these on your own, because there's a wealth of material here. And as I indicated, you can kind of keep digging for quite a while and finding new resources. So I'm going to open it up.
Excellent, Diane. We do have one or two questions for you. First and foremost, I just lost it. Hold on, let me bring it back up. The first thing was kudos for the comments about the use of scanning the work as part of the assessment process. Several people chimed in and said that that was a very useful tip, so they appreciated that. Several people have also asked, is Smart Thinking free right now? And that several people question whether or not My Lab is also free for a period of time, they thought until May. So can you give us any information on potentially some of the access points directly within Pearson and what you all are doing to support institutions during the pandemic?
Absolutely, those are great questions. So to respond to the Smart Thinking one first, there are deals that you can talk to a sales rep, reach out, ask one of us, we'll get you in touch with someone from that team. There have been some agreements with some different deals with pricing and resources, some free hours. I can't speak to the details of those because it does depend sometimes on the size of the institution and what you're looking for. But I know that they've been working very hard to provide those resources for schools to be able to work with that and have that for their students. The Smart Thinking in and of itself is an amazing tool. I'm just going to type there, so just give me a minute here while I click to Smart Thinking. If you go to the website, and it's easy just to search Smart Thinking, you can also, again, link from our COVID site right to this. You can explore some of the resources. So this does pretty much provide 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, online subject tutors, not just for writing, but math, the sciences, all sorts of things. They do have essay review. They do resume review even. They do have a list on here. If you click subjects, you can kind of click to explore, what you're looking through, what you need. There are also, if you click and notice here, there are tabs for the students to explore and understand, as well as administrators and educators to have a little bit more of an understanding of what is delivered via Smart Thinking. And you can certainly right here request information, and someone would be in touch with you, or you can just reach out to us directly. I would definitely encourage you to come here and take a look at the results. You can take some samples. There's some project results here with different colleges. So we have Volunteer State Community College. There's a little case study from them. Morgan State University, Fort Hays, Gadsden State, Valencia, West Texas. You can see there's a bunch of different ones. And it's helpful to sort of read and see what other schools have been doing with these tools and how the different tools work. So there is writing help, as we indicated. They can get some feedback, and students can then review that feedback before they turn it in. One of my colleagues, for example, uses smart thinking. And so what she has her students do is they have to send in the draft. They also have to show her the work from smart thinking. In other words, the feedback that they received from the writer that they were working with, the tutor. And so if they've submitted that with their essay, they get a few extra points. Obviously, they typically do better on their essay as well. But she's trying to encourage them to make use of the service. So they have a few extra points on the rubric, like, did you use smart thinking? Provide the documentation. There's also career writing, and I want to call this out here. This is a really, really helpful tool right now because, again, I know we've had colleges reach out and say, this is the end of the semester. Well, the middle of the semester when this all started. Now we're coming up on the end of the semester. I have students that are graduating, or I have students that are looking for summer employment. They're trying to get internship. Everything's just this crazy world. And normally students could wander into our office and we would sit down with them and walk them through, how do I prepare for an interview? What kind of coaching things do I need to know? How do I make my resume? So there's some amazing tools here for developing quality resumes, improving your business writing, and even preparing for an interview. You can even meet typical tutors, which I think is kind of a neat thing, and kind of explore that tool. You can also, after you've explored some of those things, kind of come in here and, again, click for more information. You can also just kind of look at some other customers and results and events and things like that. So definitely reach out, ask questions about that. I won't quote any pricing or packages. I know that they work different deals with institutions. So I would rather that, you can inquire and then we can get you more specifics based on what your needs are. Other tools regarding like the use of MyLab, the MyLab, obviously MyLab Math is very common, MyLab Statistics, we have Econ, slews of courses, nursing, you name it, there's lots of courses. We have a product called Foundational Skills, which is, by the way, an absolutely amazing project tool to use if you are working with GED students or adult basic ed, or you want a really wonderful overview product for readiness. We also have mastering products. Those tend to be more in the sciences. So mastering life sciences and physical sciences, running a gamut of the spectrum, everything from basic biology to microbiology, anatomy and physiology, physics, chemistry, so forth. We also have MyLab IT, so currently working with the latest versions of Office, those tools. And we also have a product called Revel. Revel is this really fascinating newer tool that allows you to use your ebooks. And I'm just going to quickly go here and, oops, I just typed revel.com. I'm so used to typing that. I'll just type Revel. Revel, Pearson Higher Ed, Revel is a wonderful tool as well. And again, you can cross-reference from the site over to here. But this is basically a tool that's going to allow you to take your traditional textbook and create a really interactive, engaging learning experience. So you've got this seamless blend of media, digital resources from the author, and assessment. And you can assign your students, you can give them a reading assessment, ask them to respond, study all kind of fluidly. There's a new enhanced Revel being released for fall. And Pearson's working with instructors that are currently using the product or new to the product to help make that transition. But again, really, really neat tool, accessible on mobile devices, all of our products. And each of these, as I pointed out to you earlier, if you go to the website, if you're at Mastering Chemistry or you're at Revel or you're at My Math Lab, whatever it is you're looking at, if you click training and support for instructors, you'll see system requirements, learning management, system information, tutorials, quick start guides, and more. And yes, they are supplying free access as part of, trying to support faculty during COVID. That is a time-sensitive option, obviously, but, certainly reach out and talk to a Pearson rep or reach out to us and ask, and we'll do what we can to get you in touch with some resources. Again, keeping in mind whatever resources you are using, if you're using Pearson materials, we also have resources for students. And I do want to call out accessibility. Pearson's really, really focusing on accessibility. We have a lot of materials, particularly posted here for students, not just about to get a textbook or to have resources to use JAWS, for example, but literally how to take the whole course. Can you take a course by navigating with a keyboard? Can I get a textbook that's HTML ready? Yes, answer to all of those is yes. In math, in science, what about graphs? Do we have alt text? Yes. Is everything 100% compliant? No, it's very difficult to achieve that because the rules are always changing, the guidelines are changing, software is always changing. So as a result, those updates need to be made regularly, but we strive to be as compliant as possible and also very very much willing to share resources with you about the accessibility and about the voluntary assessments that we've done of that. So again, I know I digress slightly about the product usage, but I definitely want to emphasize, accessibility resources exist for both you as well as students. Yes, there are some discounted rates as well.
Can you focus a little bit more on the tools and resources for students? A challenge, obviously, for all of us right now is keeping them engaged in an environment new to them.
Absolutely. And that's a great question. There are a variety of resources available from the site. And again, unfortunately, it's really difficult to show every single thing in the context of an hour before our eyes would all glaze over, right? But there are some specific resources. If you click here, this is a great place to start from the homepage. There are resources to help students learn effectively online, find accessibility information. If it's an issue of cost or access to digital materials or having a substitute for a print book, how to transition online again. And then this article in particular, being proactive, present, and purposeful, is a really, really powerful article. I'm just going to go there for a moment. This blog, this is actually written by Lexi, one of our student success coaches from Pearson Online Learning Services, and came out earlier in March. And I love how this starts. You find yourself sitting, you're at home, your laptop's in front of you, you pull up your online class, and suddenly there's all these pieces of information in front of you, and you're going, where do I even start? And that's something that's very familiar to all of us as educators as well as the students. What do I do? Click here, click here, click here. One of the things my team does when we're working with faculty is remind them that sometimes less is more. Having a very streamlined approach to designing a course can be a very helpful tool, even though it may not look as pretty. Sometimes it's easier for students to navigate. If you're using MyLab Math by itself and you're not integrating with a learning management system, instead of having 25 tabs on the menu, have 6. Best practice. It's easier to navigate. I know where to go for things. She's got some great resources here. If you scroll down, being proactive for students. We can tell them this repeatedly, but sometimes hearing it from their peers can be useful. So we often recommend share your best practices on the discussion board. One of the things I have my students do is like, what do I need to do to be successful? What do I need to do to be able to finish this unit successfully in this course? And share with each other your strategies and tips and tricks. And sometimes they say the exact same things that we would, but because their peer said it, it's really helpful. These are kind of some more tips or tricks. We do have some other articles coming out, by the way. We have another one coming out, which is more of like has an email template you can send your students about health and wellness and stress management during the pandemic. That's scheduled to be released later this week. But there are some things here too. Clicking through your course, what things are being offered. For example, as instructors, we can highlight things like smart thinking or online tutoring, NetTutor, maybe whatever resource your campus offers. Reviewing the syllabus, of course. We all have those jokes. We've seen the memes. Did you read the syllabus? It's in the syllabus. But as much as we joke about it, it is easy to get overwhelmed in an online course. So how do we call out the key information that students need? Definitely making sure that they know that there's a calendar and encouraging students to use a digital calendar or even a print planner, and then being present. Again, this varies. As we all know, some of us are doing synchronous classes, some have asynchronous materials, some are delivering materials online and, having drop-in office hour sessions. The discussion boards are critical. We have an entire blog about just doing well-designed discussion boards. It actually came as a group effort from my team. So 10 of us collaborated on what do we do in our course to try to get students engaged, to make that discussion board something meaningful, as opposed to I just submitted 2 lines so I could click and say that I did something. That's not useful. Tools to communicate with students. Obviously, we all know the importance of communication, the importance of me feeling engaged as a student. So we talk about some tools. Obviously, you might, if you're using Blackboard, for example, you have Blackboard Collaborate. A lot of people are using Zoom. People use Google Hangouts. People use other things. You can use WebEx. By the way, if you don't have Zoom, you can use a free Zoom up to 40 minutes a day. So you can have a couple students sign in and do small, up to 40 minutes a session, excuse me. So you could have students sign in and do a small review session. Apps, we have some articles that talk about different apps that faculty are using for different tools. We also have a product called Learning Catalytics, which I could wax eloquent about, but I will refrain from that except to say that it's an amazing product that allows you to deliver questions to students' mobile devices. And you might think, well, I would do that in the classroom, right? It's kind of like clickers. And it is like clickers, but it's way better than clickers. It's like clickers on steroids. So clickers limit you to multiple choice questions, right? Learning Catalytics allows you to have 18 different types of questions. You can do short answer, you can do image uploads, you can do, sketches and have students kind of like sketch the vector, tell me the result, mark the region that we're reading here. And then that information is all sent back to you, to your device. You can use this online. And you can also use it to create study groups. You can have students work in teams to answer questions. Another one of the ones that's shared on the blog here is, I mentioned earlier, my colleague Aaron wrote about affinity groups. So what he does in the beginning of the semester to kind of get students to know each other and to feel that they're not isolated is ask them to kind of give them some, key things about themselves, like what they like to do or what TV show they like to watch or how many kids they have, where they work, whatever. And he discovers common themes. And so he groups them by those themes. And so then they're in a group like the parents group or the nurses group or whatever, and they've discovered that they have rapport with other peers. And so they'll check in with each other a little bit more. And he has some great resources with that. Again, just keeping students engaged, communicating with them, using tools. If you're in our products, for example, and you, for example, use MyLab. So let's say you teach MyLab Math or MyLab Econ, or you teach with the business course or MyLab Nursing. There's a tool that's called Search and Email by Criteria that a lot of faculty haven't seen. It's under the gradebook tools. That allows you to search by how long has it been since you logged in? And you can send a student a reminder, hey, you haven't logged in 4 days. It's really important to get in there regularly into work. It's a lot easier to digest smaller chunks more often than it is to try to be in there for 5 hours straight on a Saturday afternoon. Again, we understand some of our students are frontline workers. They're also parents. They're taking care of elderly parents. They're taking care of their grandparents, whatever. So their time is limited and maybe some things slipped off their radar, and we can remind them very gently, get back on track. You can also use tools like that to send kudos. Most of the learning management systems also have ways to send out little badges or little notices or little congratulations, like, hey, you did a great job on that last quiz. And then even just things, sorry.
Go ahead, Diane.
I was going to say, even just things about how we study. We've all talked about study tips, but all of our products, as well as resources in this site, have tips and tricks about studying, how to manage our time, how to take good notes, because if anything, right now, it's even more critical that we learn good study skills as students, and as faculty working with them. I will recommend a website that's not linked here. It's called Learning Scientists. They have a blog that is, there's branches of their blog like this site that's designated for parents. There's some designated for students and some designated for faculty. And they do have podcasts. Again, my students have responded to those blogs really well. So for example, if the blog author says, I should take notes by hand instead of typing in the classroom, they want to know more and they want to know why. So there's some great podcast resources on Learning Scientists as well. Go ahead, sorry.
I'm going to take the prerogative of the chair and ask you a question that you may or may not be able to help with. One of the challenges that we're actually going to address in an upcoming webinar next Tuesday is around clinicals and externships and areas where we have a number of students that, again, the disruption has been doubly so for those individuals because we can't send them and the institution can't place them in the environments which they need to complete their education. Do you know of any tricks of the trade, or are there any resources or anything out there that the general populace should know about? It's one of the things that we're going to spend a little bit of time, or a lot of time, next Tuesday talking about. So I was just curious. It's top of mind for me as I'm working with a couple of different individuals for next week's webinar. Any thoughts or any comments from you?
Absolutely. So there are some resources that Pearson has. I'm not sure, again, what everybody's explored, but I know one of our large groups that I've worked with is Ross Medical, which has a lot of nursing students, med tech, things like that. And so one of the trainings we did for them was to focus on some of those resources. So we do have products like My Virtual Child, which is used oftentimes with, early elementary education majors, kind of looking at virtual development and allowing you to obviously simulate. It's not the same quite as being in the classroom with the students, but to give you some tools, we have a product called The Neighborhood, which is often woven into My Nursing Lab. And so you have virtual patients, and you get all of their information about the people that live in your neighborhood, about their health issues, their lifestyle, and so forth. And then there are some modules, some questions, activities, little case studies that happen from that. So for example, one person, you might get the notes from the nurse practitioner who works with some of those patients, those simulated patients, and you're asked to respond and reflect. Certainly, recognizing career tools like that. There's Automotive Success Lab, there's an HVAC lab. We've got, as I mentioned earlier, the Foundations Lab is specifically focused more on people getting like some basic work skills. So some programs are using Foundations Lab for basic work readiness to help people, retrain and work on skills while they're waiting to get out and be placed in an internship. But it sounds more like you're looking at things like My Nursing Lab, the neighborhood, which is part of that. There's the virtual child. There are a bunch of resources like that we offer.
The whole gambit, because again, I've talked with everybody from stenographers to, again, a number of the true skilled trades, like you were talking about, the HVCs of the world, auto diesel mechanics, as well as individuals, aviation mechanics, and so on. There's so many areas where, again, we are such a tactic-driven group in a lot of our occupations and a lot of what we provide quality education in, that we're trying to work towards the ways in which, in this new world, the completion of the curriculum can be done when the normal outlets for them to apply the trade and reach those last facets has been taken away.
One of the things we've done, definitely, like some of those products I mentioned can be useful. Another thing that people can do is, be doing some, again, meaningful discussion posts. We've had people taking podcasts. We've had people using TED Talks as tools and embedding them into learning management system and having students responding and doing those. Again, it depends on the topic. Obviously, that's not going to replace working in an actual tactile automotive engine. We do have, for example, a school I was working with just last week using my automotive technology lab, and they do simulations in there, which at least provides him some level of being able to assess the student's skill set and understanding some of the components. Again, in the tech world, particularly hands-on with careers, it's very hard sometimes to simulate all of the experience, but we can definitely simulate some of the experience. But there's definitely an increased onus of responsibility, I think, on the instructor and the program coordinators to be able to deliver the best that they can for that. And that's something that everybody's dealing with.
Well, I'll give everybody an opportunity to put in some questions. What type of attire should we wear when providing online lectures?
So there have been a lot of jokes around that right now on the internet, right? About like people kind of getting a little lax at home. And in fact, I'll just provide a little levity here, but one of my colleagues greeted me today like, I am wearing pants, like dress pants, because we were joking about how many of us show up and you can kind of be a little more relaxed. I've talked with faculty who do different things. For example, some will say, you know what, I'm kind of casual. I'm in a jeans and a t-shirt. So my students feel like they can respond to me. They see me at home in my work environment. They see my kid run behind me. They see my bookshelf. They find that that's helpful. It makes them feel more comfortable with their student. Others I work with will say, nope, I still dress up. I'm still pretending I'm going to work. These are my hours. I mean, I think each of us sort of finds our own comfort level with that. I personally tend to be, if I'm not on a video, I might be, if I'm just working at my desk and working on emails, I might be more in jeans and a t-shirt or athleisure clothing. But then of course, if I'm going to be on, I'm going to be wearing a scarf. I'm going to be, paying attention to that. I think it's a little more flexible, and there's a lot more understanding right now that everybody's dealing with this kind of weird new way, crazy new world. So, again, your attire, casual professional, business casual. Some companies have some expectations as to how you show up, but I think there's a little bit more of a relaxing. So I would say most of us is probably a lot more casual, jeans and a sweater, jeans and a t-shirt.
Well, my daughter certainly shows up to her Zooms in the same attire she reminds me she would go to class in, which is the sweats and so on. So.
And I've seen people that are like, wait a minute, oops, forgot. Like they'll tell me when they're off camera, I'll be right back. I'm still in my pajamas. I'm like, yeah, I really don't need to see that. But we have joked that people wear pajama bottoms and a dressy top. You can't tell, my team jokes, hey, we always keep a scarf on our desk, or we have, a necklace we put on or something like that if we're going to be training.
Something to dress it up, right?
Yep, dress it up a little bit and then But I think there's a lot more understanding and flexibility with that right now because all of us are dealing with that environment. And it's kind of different. You know, you're not getting in your car and driving someplace, or in our case, we would travel a lot. We're not, you know, going to the airport and hopping on a plane and showing up and doing a training. So, you know, I think it changes some of our expectations.
Another question, could a teacher do an online test via Zoom by an appointment time with the student like a verbal questioning test?
Absolutely. We've done we've helped faculty set up like oral exams via Zoom. I've also worked with a faculty member who set up a Zoom time where her students logged in on their laptops and worked in front of her. So she could see everybody sitting there working at their computer. Obviously, they could still try to have some other device nearby, but I think as soon as, you know, people's eyes start to turn and they're looking over here, it's pretty obvious to the instructor. I don't think that would work if you had a class of 75 students, but if you had 25 students, or, you know, you're testing 15 students at a time, it's probably more doable. But absolutely, we've done Zoom meetings where we've done trainings. I've done Zoom with my students where they were working in groups and then responding to me and talking, and it's definitely a way to interact, more than just a chat option. Chat and text and emails are a great way for them to ask me questions. My background's math, by the way, and statistics. Let me just explain that. So they can scan me their work, they can ask me questions, but it just doesn't take the place of us talking together. Even a phone call can be really nice, but I like the Zoom, it's face-to-face. We've also used Google Hangouts. Depending on if you have a learning management system, a lot of them also have some sort of collaboration tool available.
I'm going to stall for a second and do a shameless plug for our upcoming webinars. If you do have any other questions, please, we have about 10 minutes left, so go ahead and put them in. As a teaser, you heard me talk about the fact that next Tuesday, we'll be focused on a C-SPAN CARES Act webinar where we will do a deeper dive into the whole basis for clinical and externship and internship related issues and concerns. We will have India Tibbs from the Allied Health community, obviously the head of ABHES, and potentially some of the other accreditors to talk about the reality that accreditation, and whether it be programmatic or national or regional accreditation, as well as state governance, plays a significant role in the do's and don'ts you can do with clinical apprenticeship externships. We might also have a surprise guest for you from the Department of Education. I'm trying to seal the deal on that a little bit later today. This Thursday, 2 days from now, we will be having a panel where we will do a comprehensive review yet again of all things CARES Act, including the Paycheck Protection Program, as well as the policy issues that we haven't yet seen from the Department of Education: satisfactory academic progress, R2T4, leave of absences, a final determination hopefully on the length of time and extension, like we just saw with cohort default rates and with federal work study around the submission of audits and things of that nature. And of course, the HERF, the Higher Education Emergency Relief Funds, and the continuation of looking at the application process, as well as do's and don'ts and interpretations of what the, in particular, institutional portion of those funds can be used for. And you've heard enough of me in a number of these webinars. We've been fortunate to have wonderful individuals like Diane present with us. This Thursday, we're going to have at least a panel of 3, potentially 4 attorneys to discuss with us key questions and key areas around the entire depth and breadth of the CARES Act. So you hopefully will stay registered for the upcoming events we have as well. Diane, I think you have answered all of their questions. I'm going to ask the question I always ask when I'm up on Capitol Hill. I'm naive at many things, and I always ask the question, what am I too naive or don't know well enough to know that I should be asking you right now in order to draw out any final thoughts that you have before we say thank you for your help and your assistance today?
That's another great question. Again, I think there's so much out there that all of us are in the, like, I don't know where to start sometimes. I don't know where to look. What kinds of questions should I be asking? And I, just like I would tell my students, no question is a dumb question. You know, ask if you're not sure. Do we have products? Yes. I actually moved here to the Neighborhood 2.0 page that I mentioned, and it kind of shows you that there's more than 40 characters. They give you a the socioeconomic, cultural backgrounds, as well as family structures. We have eye care integration, so there's explanation of that. We have my Brady lab, which is for like first responders kind of stuff. We even have things for firefighters. We've got stuff for HVAC. There's a lot of material out there. I think, again, everybody's sort of in this unique place where like, wow, I have to think about things that I didn't think about before. I have to figure out new ways to deliver this information. There is a lot available, but it also then, means that it's going to take some time to choose and find them and work through it. But again, whatever it is that you're working with, whether it is, the HVAC or, medical terminology lab, or it's trying to figure out how do I support students that are dealing with, really severe amounts of stress because of their jobs and their families and their they're on the front line right now. We're trying to provide resources, and if, definitely email if you're not sure, and we'll try to track things down. There's a lot out there that I don't know, like every day goes by. Pearson's hashtag is always learning, and that has to be one of the reasons why I actually left full-time higher ed and moved into working with them and still teaching part-time, because I'm very, very passionate about research. I'm also very passionate about research that's practical and that has implication for my classroom so that people can get an education and be successful. So I would definitely encourage you to, ask questions, look things up, say what's going on out there, what can we do, and what's in it for me that I can use to help my students be successful.
Exploration is always a great thing, right?
It absolutely.
With that, I want to once again thank Pearson for lending us you today, Diane, for an hour, and for all of the work that you guys have done to put together this wonderful resource, once again, for the complete gambit and the full depth and breadth of our community as we're all going through these challenging times. I think that I've certainly learned a great deal today and continue to be amazed at how phenomenal our community is in putting together things to help one another as we all try and navigate these challenges. We do remind you that this presentation, along with all of our presentations, will be loaded up shortly after we conclude today on our C-SPAN website so that you can review them once again. I don't have, Diane, if you want to give your email address or your information so that if there's anybody that wants to reach out to you directly, they can do so. I'd love to make sure that that happens. And if you follow up with us at C-SPAN afterwards, we'll make sure we get it. But Diane, your email address?
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and put a link into the chat for you. And my email address is simply my name, diane.hollister@pearson.com. And it's 2 L's. The Hollister is like the super expensive clothes that your kids ask you to buy at the mall. Unfortunately, I'm not related. I don't make the money on it.
Well, and wife is Ann Taylor, so I can deal with the names and the expensive names that unfortunately we don't get the dividends from. Again, thank you everybody for participation today. We do hope that you will come back and join us again for another of our presentations this Thursday. Again, to refresh and remind you, we will have an update, a comprehensive update with many of the attorneys, so you can get some free legal advice, if nothing else, as well as a review of where everything stands. Next Tuesday, we'll be focusing on clinicals, internships, and externships and the challenges that come with those, and have accreditors as well as potentially Department of Ed individuals to help navigate and discuss those key issues. And the following Thursday, we'll have a week from this Thursday, we will have Dr. Joel English from Ames Centura Colleges talking about what he's done over the first 13, 14 weeks of the pandemic and all of the challenges that have come upon them and their programs, avionics, as well as a number of other forms and disciplines, and what he's looking to do for the next 14 weeks. So a look back and a look forward from a key head of an institution's perspective. Again, trying to share with you as many different forms and discussion points as possible. Thank you once again for joining us, Diane. I appreciate it. Thank you once again. Tell Trina and Manny and Cheryl, all of the individuals with Pearson, once again, how much we appreciate it. Thank you giving of your time and of their resources. And again, we will talk to you soon. Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.